Listeria monocytogenes is a pathogen of concern in food production environments. It's the leading cause of death from food-borne illnesses in the United States. Once Listeria monocytogenes becomes established in an operation, it can serve as a source of repeated product contamination and potentially lead to foodborne illness outbreaks. A number of sprout recalls have involved contamination with Listeria monocytogenes. The produce safety rule requires each sprout operation to sample and test the growing, harvesting, packing, and holding environments for Listeria species or Listeria monocytogenes. The goal of environmental monitoring for Listeria is to prevent contamination of sprouts and food contact surfaces by identifying potential harborage sites for the pathogen and ensuring corrective actions have eliminated the pathogen. This video will demonstrate how to conduct environmental sampling in a sprout operation. An easy-to-follow written environmental monitoring plan is important to ensure that the plan is continually implemented in a consistent manner. The produce safety rule requires sprout operations to establish a written environmental monitoring plan that includes a sampling plan to specify what to test for, that is, Listeria species or Listeria monocytogenes, the frequency of sampling and when to collect samples, the sample collection sites, and corrective actions to take in response to positive samples, including details on when and how those actions will be accomplished. Sampling starts with choosing a proper environmental sampling kit and acquiring sample collection supplies. All sample collection supplies should be obtained from reputable vendors. Supplies may include sterile sample collection bags, sterile pre-hydrated or unhydrated sponges, swabs or sponge sticks containing neutralizing broth or neutralizing buffer. Sponges are for sampling large surfaces, while swabs are for sampling small surfaces and crevices. Some sampling kits also include plastic disposable gloves. You will also need coolers with ice packs to maintain acceptable temperatures during shipment. The working area, for example the countertop or rolling cart where you prepare or conduct your sampling, needs to be clean. Be sure to have any sampling forms or records that need to be completed. Sample containers, for example, swab tubes or bags should be properly labeled prior to starting sample collection. It is important that persons that collect samples follow aseptic procedures to ensure that samples are not contaminated during sampling. Sample collection personnel should wear clean clothes, single-use gloves, and a hairnet. Hands should be washed immediately before sampling and prior to putting on gloves. Gloves should be put on in a manner that does not contaminate the outside of the gloves. Gloves should be properly disposed of after use. Hands should be kept away from the mouth, nose, eyes, and face while collecting samples. Instructions from the manufacturers of environmental sampling kits should be strictly followed. Sample collection personnel should read the instruction carefully prior to sampling. Routine environmental sampling should be performed during production, rather than after production when the environment has been cleaned and sanitized. If Listeria monocytogenes is present in a harborage site, for example, in a niche within a piece of equipment, it can dislodge and spread during operation, making it more likely to be detected. Taking environmental samples several hours, for example, 3 to 4 hours into production, and preferably towards the end of production, just prior to cleanup, results in a greater likelihood of detecting any Listeria coming from a harborage site. The produce safety rule states that environmental samples must be collected no less than monthly for operations that have proven to control Listeria over time. Operations may choose to collect samples every week from a certain portion of specified sampling sites. It may also be useful to vary the day of the week and the time of the day for sampling to provide a better indication of overall conditions within the production environment. The written sampling plan must specify the sites where samples will be collected. Listeria grow and survive well in a wide range of conditions in the environment, especially those that are moist and either warm or cool. The selection of the appropriate sampling sites should be well thought out and should include food contact and non-food contact surfaces. Presence of Listeria on a food contact surface poses a more immediate risk of contaminating product compared to presence of Listeria on a non-food contact surface that is remote from the product. A floor plan or map of the operation is helpful for the sanitation team to identify sampling sites. On this simplified floor plan, several food contact surfaces and non-food contact surfaces are highlighted as examples. Floor drains are critical non-food contact surface sites that should be included in the sampling plan. Floor drains are a good catch point for contaminants that may be present in the production environment because they're usually wet, difficult to access or clean, and collect water that exits production area. While larger sprout operations will likely have more sampling sites than smaller operations, even the smallest sprout growers should collect samples from at least 5 food contact surface sites and 5 non-food contact surface sites from each production area. For example, each growing room per sampling event. Sampling sites can be organized into different groups. For example, groups A through L, as shown in the sampling location table here. After completing all the sites in all groups, you may rotate back to the sites in Group A. After collection, samples should be placed in a cooler with ice packs and should be shipped to the lab within 24 hours after they are collected. Keep the samples refrigerated throughout. Sample submission forms should be filled out according to the lab's instructions. Check with the lab in advance to make sure they can receive and process the samples on the day of receipt. Sprout growers should not composite samples taken from food contact surfaces. Each food contact surface sample should be from its own specific, identified site to allow the operation to quickly identify the location that is contaminated and take appropriate and immediate corrective actions when needed. Compositing environmental samples from multiple non-food contact surface sites is an accepted practice for an operation where Listeria is in control with no recent positive results. Make sure to communicate clearly with the lab on the profile of the composite samples. If a composite sample tests positive for the presence of Listeria species, individual sampling is strongly recommended as a follow-up until the specific location of the organism is identified and eliminated. Please note, a single swab or sponge should not be used for multiple locations, as this could spread Listeria should it be present. The produce safety rule requires certain records associated with environmental monitoring must be established and kept. They include the written environmental monitoring plan, results of all analytical tests conducted, any analytical methods used, and corrective actions taken. Effective environmental monitoring for Listeria allows sprout growers to detect Listeria within the production environment if present. It helps in monitoring the trend of Listeria contamination in the operation and preventing contamination of sprout products.